Some of you may remember in the early 90s, Pearl and I took a year off and we went back to school in Guelph. And one of the events during the orientation was a gathering of all of the people who had come to do grad studies at Guelph at that time, and from all over the world. So it was kind of an interesting evening. We were at the grad club, you know, having a beer and chatting. And someone mentioned to one of the other grad students that I was a minister, and he came directly over to me. And he said, "You're a Christian?" And I said, "Yeah, yes I am." And he said, "Oh, so am I." And, you know, we got talking, excuse me. And he was from Ethiopia. And I said, "Oh, Ethiopia, wow, you know, so you were, you know, the product of the colonial enterprise of Christianizing Africa." And he looked at me shocked. He says, "We were Christians long before you." And I said, "What do you mean? Have you not heard of the Ethiopian eunuch?" And I thought, well, of course I had. I just never really thought of him as Ethiopian. You know, it's a story in the Bible. But George, if you want to put up the first map. So this is the part of the world. The green big block down there is next to Somalia is Ethiopia. And the little tiny sliver up above on the Mediterranean Sea is Israel. And so, you know, I never thought of the Ethiopian eunuch, as I say, as an Ethiopian, like someone who really was there and traveling along, like it was always a story to talk about various aspects of the faith. But, you know, as this young man pointed out to me, it was an encounter that changed the world. It was an encounter that changed his world, that changed Ethiopia and parts of Africa in the first century of the Common Era now. So not yet to move that. Oh yeah, you can go to the next map. So the story says that the Ethiopian eunuch was traveling between Jerusalem and Gaza on the sea, and so he maybe was sailing part of the way as well. But what it says is, an angel came to Philip and said, "Get up and go." And this is the crazy part. "Get up and go into the desert between Jerusalem and Gaza," because it is desert. Less so now because of irrigation, but at the time it would have been quite a desert road. "Get up and go, and there you will meet someone who needs to hear the good news." So Philip, you know, I remember as a kid having this wonderful image of Philip running along beside this chariot, you know, and there's this Ethiopian eunuch. And let me say, we sometimes talk about this mainly more out of our sense of discomfort with homophobia or rules about gender and all that kind of thing. This Ethiopian man was a very powerful man. He had great wealth. He was not marginalized by his culture. In fact, he was the minister of all the wealth of the Queen of Ethiopia. And he was probably not Jewish, but many people came to Jerusalem to learn about, you know, Judaism and the practice of faith there. And so he was what might be called a righteous Gentile. He would have been very black-skinned, and so kind of exotic in the minds of the people he was there. And so here is Philip running along beside this stranger, and the stranger is reading a scroll that's about the book of Isaiah. And he says to him, do you get that? And the Ethiopian says, "Hop in and help me understand it." You know, not someone powerless to someone powerful, as we often hear the story. Philip would have been the powerless one in the story. You know, not particularly wealthy or important, but he jumped in and they had this conversation that helped this Ethiopian person understand the good news that Jesus had come to tell. You can put up the slide. Okay, so just leave that one for now, George. So that's, you know, this is a paved road, but this is a photo of a point in the road between Jerusalem and Gaza. So, you know, you get the idea where it might have been a little warm at noon running along that road. So one of the things about the book of Acts, as I said before I read, is that it is the story of how the church began its ministry. What are the essential elements of being a Christian community? And so now I'm going to use a dirty word. I'm glad the children are downstairs right now because it's a word that is very offensive to most people in our church, and the word is evangelism. We do not like the word evangelism, and we certainly don't practice it as a rule. Not many of us are out knocking on doors and that kind of thing. But first I want to say evangelism just means sharing good news. It's all, it's a Greek word that essentially means sharing good news. So if that's the case, and this is, Roger inspired me by chiming in during the service last week, to ask a real question here. Why do you think we have a problem with evangelism? Like what is it that we don't like about that? Why don't we react to it? So, jump in. Or unless I'm wrong, maybe some of you have been door knocking this week and I didn't realize it. And if I have, then I have to really kind of go back around. But what?
It forces us to consider new opinions and new ideas that we might not like.
So we might hear, we might not get to tell our story, we might just get to hear one. Right? Invite them in. Yeah. You'd feel creepy and pushy? Yeah. Yeah.
I think that perhaps those who have done evangelism usually being ex-Pentecostals, or being the fanatical, right-wing people who are sometimes a little flaky, and so it's a church that hates those girls, actually.
Huh.
That's the way it's done.
Anyone else? The purpose is unknown. Right. Right. I sometimes wonder if we understand what our intentions are. Because we've been exposed to the pushy, creepy, arrogant, all that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, we use the word televangelist, right? And that does not inspire a good image in anyone's mind. I think, way back to being out in front of the manse there years ago cutting the grass, and it was a really busy time. Kids, and I think I had a funeral in the afternoon. I was rushing to get this done because I hadn't done it, and the neighbors hate my dandelions, so I'm trying to get them down. I'm bombing through the yard, and all of a sudden there's this smug-looking guy standing in my driveway. And I look at him, and I'm ignoring this guy. I just keep cutting the grass, and he keeps standing there, and I'm thinking, okay, he's going to stand there. I turn the lawnmower off, and I say, "Hi." He says, "Do you know where you're going when you die?" I said, "I don't know, but, well, because I'm here to share love with you." I'm going, "What?" And finally, I was so irritated. I said, "If you love me, cut my damn lawn." And I went inside. They haven't been back. I don't know what happened, but it's been a great relief. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we associate evangelism, or it becomes kind of a competition. I remember when we would come back after summer holidays when I was at seminary, and we'd always have kind of a potluck, everyone coming back. And there was a couple of the, more fundamentalist Christians who were in our class, and I remember standing in line with them getting food at the potluck, and they were comparing numbers of how many people they had converted over the summer. And it was like one had one more than the other, and this was like a failure to God or something. And I'm thinking, come on, you guys. Like, is that what evangelism is? Is that what it means to share the good news? I think one of the challenges, too, to us is we don't always have the language. I mean, this is why we've invited Rose and why we've invited many other people to tell their story and share their faith here. In part to inspire us, in part to practice. Because most of us don't use the word Jesus unless we've just hit our hand with a hammer or something, We're not comfortable talking that way. And so partly it's an activity, a necessity of recovering language with which to share our faith with others. How do we talk about our faith? And that's a challenge too. For me, the best image of evangelism is this. It's one beggar telling another where he has found food. That's what it means to invite someone to church. That's what it means to invite someone to consider themselves, rather than cursed or a failure or imperfect, to consider themselves beloved children of God. In the story, Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch are riding in the chariot through the desert. And, the eunuch says, if only there was some water, I could be baptized. Well, if you look at the picture, there's no water in it. And all of a sudden, there appears water in the wilderness. And we can go to the next photo. And he said, let me be baptized. And they went, and he was baptized in the water. And there was a miracle taking place in all kinds of ways beyond water in the desert. Some great transformation that happened in that one person, that years and years, thousands of years later, I ran into a man in the grad club at the University of Guelph who said, we were Christians long before you. And my understanding was awakened, and I understood the good news in a new way too. That's what each of us are called to. In the Acts of the Apostles, we hear the stories of the beginning of the church. And in our own faltering small steps, we are called to practice evangelism, not to convert others, but to convert ourselves in those relationships. And as Ruth said, perhaps hear some things that are difficult for us to hear, but to be vessels of God's love, reaching out to others. Amen.